Good morning. I would like to welcome you to my presentation entitled Equity, Empathy, and Education, Promoting Positive and Effective Interactions Within Diverse Cultures. I am Dr. James Thompson, and I serve as an assistant professor on a tenured track here at Austin Peay State University. I am in my first semester, and I'm glad to have you all here, and I look forward to the collaboration. For the learning outcomes today, I want to briefly touch on micro and macroaggressions and really highlight the importance of micro and macroaggressions, highlight the effects it have on higher education, especially the adverse effects it has on the health of people of color. Also, like to talk about the positive and effective interactions of having a diverse workforce in higher education. And lastly, to create and implement an opt-in focus group who have the desire to dismantle and to disrupt what's going on in a lot of places in higher education and in other workplaces. To discuss how do we create a safe and brave space through book study, and also what are some other policy implications and practice implications that we can do in higher education. Some of the ground rules and expectations for today. Um, we want to promote respect and inclusion of all contributions. Uh, I encourage you to have an open mind, to share your thoughts and your feelings in a respectful manner, to listen carefully to what others have to say, and to digest it before we're so quick to give a response. If you have some informative and thoughtful ideas you would like to share, I would encourage you to use the chat box feature in this presentation and share your thoughts in the chat box. And I have two monitors up, so I'm going to check the chat box frequently, and I'm going to address those questions and those ideas throughout the presentation. If you leave here feeling uncomfortable, it's okay, because that's human nature. It's human nature to feel uncomfortable discussing a topic that many of us shy away from. Many of us feel like it's taboo to talk about diversity in the workplace. Many of us, especially people of color, we don't know the repercussions if we bring this up to our supervisor. What are the repercussions if I voice my opinion about how diverse is his workplace? Are we recruiting people of color into leadership positions? So even being a person of color, we feel some type of repercussions. So if you walk away feeling uncomfortable, that's okay. And make every attempt not to generalize everything you hear and see and think towards certain people. And every time you see that little guy at the bottom with the wheels turning, I'm going to give you an opportunity to do an independent activity. We have 3 or 4 embedded independent activities throughout this presentation. I understand that there's a 20-second lag from what I say until you all receive it. So I have to be mindful of that. So for our first activity, companies that embrace diversity and inclusion in all aspects of their business statistically outperform their peers. And that's a quote by Josh Bersin. What I want you to do for the next couple of minutes in your chat box, give me your thoughts and reactions, to that quote. We'll give you 2 minutes, and then we're going to address that as a group. All right, I see something in the chat box. It says, and thank you, Roxanne, so much. It says, I believe that this is true because when you embrace diversity, you allow people to be authentic. Then they will bring the best they have to offer, and the company will be better for it. Roxanne, thank you so much. Jill and Jesse also contributed. Jill said, I believe diversity of thought from all strengthens not just the company or the organization, but collegiality and outcomes. Very good. Thank you all for your contributions. And we're going to hit on that today, especially the first one where Roxanne mentioned about being authentic in the workplace. Being authentic is allowing folk to be able to say something and to speak their mind without having some type of repercussion. And that's very important. If someone says something, they want to be authentic. They have to be safe. They have to feel like they're in a safe environment. So very good. I brought that up because when we look at higher education, and you all should have access to the presentation. I'll put it out on a Google Shared Drive. You can have access to that and all my resources, my references. But I want to share something about statistics and data. It's from the National Center for Education Statistics. The reason we had the prior slide about embracing diversity in the workplace, about how important it is to have diversity in the workplace and what are the major contributions. But then when I look at this slide, it makes me wonder how far have we come along in higher education between 1999, 2018, when you look at full professors going down to associate professors. If you see, you barely can see this chart, but the first part of it, the purple, you have white males and white females. And it contributes to maybe about 80%. But then you look at the other parts, the black males and the black females, Hispanic males, Hispanic females. You look at the minority groups, they're around 3%, 4%, 6%. So this is something I want you all to use as a frame when I speak throughout this presentation, to have that in the back of your mind. When is the time to address these issues? The time is now. No longer can we continue to put this on the back burner. Now, going back to, I believe, who said something? Roxanne said something earlier. And I want to address what Roxanne said about diversity, about being authentic. I have a couple of quotes. To be authentic, the cost of code switching is immense as it causes minorities to spend time worrying about cultural compatibility rather than dwelling on things that do matter. We hear that all the time, code switching. I hear a couple of my colleagues talk about they have to code switch, not just here at my workplace, but being in education over 15 years in K-12 education and now transitioning into higher education. I hear that code switching. Why is it that certain groups of individuals feel as if they have to code switch when they go into mainstream? Does it mean that those individuals who are not identified as part of mainstream, that they're lower? I mean, what does it mean? Please keep that in mind. We have to ask those hard questions that a lot of folk don't want to ask nor answer. So why is it that certain people have to code switch just to fill in? Now, Roxanne said earlier about being authentic. So when you code switch, do you lose your authenticity? The next quote, the cost to fit in. Traumatic stress is linked to negative mental health outcomes, such as depression, anger, physical reactions, avoidance, intrusion, hypervigilance, and low self-esteem. And this traumatic stress that we're talking about is derived from microaggressions and macroaggressions. It caused adverse health effects in certain people, especially people of color. So what? Why is this important? Why is this talk important in higher education? The third bullet, because it is long overdue. These adverse situations must first be called out and no longer dismissed as someone's ignorance, which only perpetuates the problem. We hear that all the time. Someone does something. Someone make a slight at another individual because of their sexual orientation, because of how they look, because of where they're from. And then once that person becomes a victim and the perpetrator tends to get away by saying, oh, I did not know what I said was offensive. How long we will continue to allow individuals to use that as an excuse? The quote at the bottom of the slide says, unity, not uniformity, must be our aim. We attain unity only through a variety. Differences must be integrated, not annihilated, not absorbed. And that's a quote that I wanted to share from Mary Parker Follett. Again, it's about unity. It's about coming together, uniting people from different backgrounds, different socioeconomic status, different viewpoints, different political affiliations. Just because I don't believe what you believe in doesn't make me a lower person than you are. Just because you believe in something doesn't make you superior or inferior. And we want to be mindful of other people's emotions and feelings as well. The theoretical framework that this talk is heavily weighted upon is by Dr. Darrell Sue and his colleagues. And one study he did, he looked at white counselors and white counselors treating people of color in counseling sessions. And what he found out, and his colleagues found out, is that the sessions were not as effective when the white counselors did not have a self-awareness about racial and cultural being of their biases or their stereotypes they had towards other people of color. So what Dr. Sue and his colleagues found out that white colleagues and counselors must have an awareness of the cultural diverse client's perspective. They must better understand the people that they serve. If they're going to render counseling sessions to individuals, well, they need to understand their background. There's an old saying that says, walk a mile in my shoes. We have to seek first to understand. So when we talk about self-awareness, based on Dr. Sue's study, it says is a prerequisite to developing multicultural competency among white therapists, and that it would improve the delivery of mental health services to clients of colors or with diverse backgrounds. Now, that's just in the counseling world, a counseling sector. But how does this translate to the world of higher education? If we have professors working with our students and we don't understand the students that we serve, are we doing all that we can to meet those students' needs? If we are in leadership in higher education and we don't understand all the people that are working in our institutions, be it faculty or staff, if we don't understand their background because they're different and we take those individuals for granted, are we doing all that we can to become a better organization that embraces diversity? 3 types of microaggressions: your micro assault, micro insult, and micro invalidation. And you look at micro assault, something that happens occasionally when folk use verbal or nonverbal attack against people of color or against individuals because of their sexual orientation or because they belong to a certain socioeconomic status or they're not a part of the affluent society. When they use certain words to bring people down, like in micro insult, communicating rudeness and insensitivity and demeaning a person's racial heritage or identity, being insensitive towards others just because they may not be from this country. You're insensitive towards others because they're from a different culture. You're insensitive towards others because you don't really know a whole lot about them. You feel threatened. And because you feel threatened, you begin to cast out derogatory labels and degrade people for being different. So the examples of microaggressions that we have here on the screen, and I want to use some from my personal experience. Let me pause for 1 second. I see. I want to check in the chat box. Make sure I don't have any questions. All right. The examples of microaggressions that you have before you are personal to me. I've heard this many times. Someone says to me, "You have an earned PhD and had to complete a dissertation. You must be really smart." "Oh, you haven't taught a multicultural course before. You don't act like most Black people, and you are very articulate. Are you Black, or you look like you're mixed?" The last one I just read really resonates with me because being a person from who identify with multi-ethnic groups, I'm not mixed. You mix ice cream. You probably have mixed vegetables, but people are not mixed, and that's so offensive. Using that type of terminology towards someone who represents different racial or different ethnic groups. Don't use the word mixed. Very offensive. The quote at the bottom by Mara Yang: "Microaggressions add up. No matter how confident people from marginalized or underrepresented communities feel about their identities, microaggressions create unsafe spaces and make individuals feel like perpetual outsiders." It adds up throughout time. And the slide that we had earlier about the adverse health effects on people of color or other marginalized groups of people, it adds up. It has a toll on our health. So we have to be mindful when we do things, when we have policies in place, or we do things throughout time. And I've heard it said many times, it's being done like this because it has always been done like this. If it's not broke, don't fix it. It is broken. It is broken. That's why we need to fix it. Why is this work important? It is critical that organizations realize that the undercurrent of failing to address racial issues has an adverse effect on students, faculty, and staff. The world of higher education is not exempted from this discussion. It is simply a microcosm of microaggressions that is rampant throughout our world. It continues to rise, and when the oppressor does not realize that he or she has caused harm, what does it do to the organization? If we don't call the the injustice out, if we don't call when the perpetrators or when those who make offensive comments out for doing or saying what they have done repeatedly, and we stand by the sideline and we watch, and we take the approach that I'm not going to say anything. That's not my responsibility. That means, are you being complicit by not saying anything, by watching, by allowing it to happen repeatedly, by not taking a bold stance or having courage enough to stand up for what is right? We have to speak up and speak out. And by having a diverse workforce, it means embracing diversity. and being inclusive. It's not just one thing to say we have a diverse organization, but you also want to be inclusive. Who are you bringing to the table? Who is sitting at your table? If you're sitting at the table and everybody looks like you, everybody thinks like you, everybody got the same perspective, everybody live in your neighborhood, everybody who fellowship in your church look just like you, you begin to ask the question, you have to ask, is this diversity? So we have an activity about accountability. We all should be responsible for what we say and how we treat others. Therefore, when a person is called out for being discriminatory or harassing, we do not continue to make the same excuse. We do not continue to make the same excuse. I did not mean it like that. For the next 2 minutes, I want you to write your thoughts in the chat box. And I want to share a couple thoughts from the chat box. Spend about 2 minutes. All right, Dr. Ashford Ashworth asks, what is an alternative mix, biracial, multi-ethnic? All right, very good question. Or Miss Rutledge stated, you may not have intended for it to be offensive, but now that you know that it is, take that as a learning moment so that you don't unintentionally discriminate or offend others. Very good, Miss Rutledge. I mean, once you make a mistake, learn from that mistake. Ms. Jill said, action to stop the behavior, not apology, speaks volume. Wow. Action to stop the behavior, not apologies, speak volumes. We hear apologies all the time. It's okay to apologize for making rude comments, for saying something that's offensive. But over time, the true test is whether or not you've learned from your prior mistakes. If you continue to make the same mistakes, it's no longer called just a mistake, but it's called a habit. Jacqueline said, if you have to qualify your response, it probably isn't okay to say it to begin with. That's very good. I believe that's Tia Miller. If you have to qualify what you're about to say, it may not be best to say it. And Annazette Houston says, I feel that what we permit, we promote. This has given me the courage to speak up and speak out. And I'm going to read one more from Aaron Dale. All too often, those of us that are white fail to call out our peers for making these harmful comments, myself included, all in an effort to avoid discomfort Aaron, you can speak right now with me. You can actually take over this presentation, Aaron. I thank you for saying what you're saying now. But I heard an excellent quote a couple of weeks ago that speaks volume. There's a difference between uncomfortable and unwelcome. It is time to speak up because discomfort is okay. In fact, sometimes it is what is necessary. What is not okay is creating an unwelcoming environment in an effort to avoid discomfort. Aaron, kudos to you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Yes, we have to speak up and speak out. My background being I'm African American, Chinese, and Thai. Growing up, individuals look at me and say that, well, you're not all the way black. I never understood what that means, not to be all the way something. But that resonated with me throughout my life. You're not all the way this. I don't allow people to tell me who I am. I know who I am. I know who I identify with. But what becomes heartbreaking is when we do this as adults to people. We try to put them in a certain checkbox. You have to identify with a certain group. People are going to identify with the groups that they feel comfortable with. But even though you identify with certain groups, you should have enough sense, enough humility, enough courage to be able to speak out against those individuals who like to make certain comments to other groups that they're inferior to. So actionable measures. We're going to spend the next 20 minutes, 25 minutes looking at actionable measures. Change through practice and policies. We have identified the issue. We know what the issues are. We do have a need. We know there are problems in our organization. Identifying is one thing, but are you willing to go above and beyond than just having words on a paper that say, I have a diversity plan. I have a strategic diversity plan in my institution. Are you going to go beyond words on a paper to say that in my mission statement, in my vision statement, we talk about diversity? It has to be more than just a blurb on the wall. It has to be some actionable steps that you all are willing to take in order to move your organization into an organization which represents inclusivity and represents diversity. Being intentional with effective communication. Anytime we talk about change in life, especially being in a marriage with my beautiful wife, when we come with the disagreements, most people in marriages want to point fingers at the other person. But what I've learned in life, that even in relationships with your spouse, in relationships in organizations, in relationship with a childhood friend, in relationship with colleagues, in relationship with your mentor, in relationships with your children, I've learned that when we want to change someone, it doesn't always happen. But instead of taking the approach that I need to change someone, we need to look inwardly. What can I do to help change the problem? Sometimes the problem is how we see the problem becomes the problem. We always want to say that there's not anything wrong with how we're running our organization. But if you look at your organization from the same lens from the last 10, 15, 20, 30 years, how are you going to remain competitive with other institutions that decide that, no, it's time for a change? It's time to bring in diverse individuals with different perspectives and to value their opinions, to value their intellect in order to remain competitive. You have to look at it through a different set of lens. And that lens begins with you. Being intentional with effective communication. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. When you have a moment later on, I want you to look at that URL that I have embedded in this PowerPoint, and it's from Franklin Covey. It's very is an eye opener for me when I looked at it, and I shared this with my students as well in one of my classes. But we have to seek first to understand, then to be understood. I mean, sometimes we just have to be active listeners. We have to ask certain questions, but sometimes we don't need to even open our mouths. Just listen to other people. Have an open mind. When we talk about this diversity and inclusivity stuff, you have to have an open mind. Because if you're used to doing certain things for so many years, and now all of a sudden someone says, we probably need to change a little bit, shift gears. If you don't have an open mind and your mind is fixed and you're not willing to grow, then you're going to be stubborn. You're going to have some pushback. And again, it's not good for an organization. Avoid the urge of wanting to stand in judgment. It's not all about judging people. Again, it's looking inwardly. What can I do? I'm not going to judge people when I turn on my TV and they say certain things. They represent different political viewpoints. They're out there protesting. They protest certain ways. Other people protest other ways. That's not my business. My business is stand for what's right, to stand for integrity, not to cast judgment. Not everybody choose to do the right thing. But if we're looking at this diversity topic, this diversity issue, start with you. Look inwardly. What can you do? The next approach in practices and policies. Change begins with taking that self-reflection and perception regarding diversity. Recognize that we all have inherent biases, that all people have towards individuals that do not look like them. Stop using this quote that I was raised and I don't see color. I see red, blue, red, yellow, green, orange. I don't see color. Do not dismiss people's ethnic background. Do not dismiss what people have gone through with many years of hurt and turmoil. Being degraded for so many years. Being inferior for so many years because you have a party who believes that, well, you don't look like us, you don't belong in this sector here. So by saying I don't see race, you're dismissing the many years of history that many people have gone through. But I got a question here about inherent biases. How does inherent biases towards others affect how you choose to interact with them? Inherent biases are not bad. Again, we all have it. I have inherent biases. Don't tell people you don't have inherent biases. We all have it. Inherent biases become negative only when you act out on it. It becomes negative when you begin to treat people negatively and treat people differently because they're different from you. That's when inherent biases become negative. Stop pretending that diversity does not exist. Allow your data to tell the story. When you go back to your organizations and to your institutions, to your department, to your programs, to your wherever you decide to go back to, and you decide that you want to take this platform and you want to have a dialogue and you want to talk to individuals within your organization, paint the picture using the data from your organization. This is a very sensitive topic that makes people very uncomfortable. Therefore, use the data to tell your story. Don't allow the data to manipulate people, but allow the data to move people to do what is right. Don't use data to make people just feel bad, but use that data to make some action, some actionable steps. Also, using data will help take the being so subjective in the emotion out of the equation. Look at some of the data points in your organization. What are the total number and percentage of students of color enrolled, the graduation rate, the retention rate in your organization, in your institution? Look at the total number and percentage of faculty of color and at what rank. I gave you a data table early on in the presentation. And in that data table, it talks about from 1999, I believe, to 2018, about the percentage of white professors versus black professors versus Hispanic professors. And the trend from 1998 to 2018. Look at the trend. Compare that trend to your organization. Does that fit your organization? The total number percentage of faculty of color and at what rank? Look at the administrators that you have in your institution. Good leadership requires you to surround yourself with people of diverse perspectives who can disagree with you without fear of retaliation. And that's a quote by Doris Goodwin. I like that last part. Surrounding yourself with diverse perspectives, with individuals who can disagree with you without feeling fear of retaliation. We wonder why things haven't changed for so many years because of fear of retaliation. Many individuals feel as if they're on a tenure track. I can't say what I really wanted to say, even though I know it's the right thing, because if I say it, then I might not get tenured. That's something that's very disheartening. We in higher education, we should have enough integrity. We should embrace and value different perspectives, people from different backgrounds, without fear of retaliation. So now it's your turn. It's your turn to look at the diversity and inclusion within your organization. So when examining your institution or your department or your office, does your faculty and staff mirror the students that you serve? How about your leadership team, your administrators? What story is being told about your organization? Spend about 2 minutes in the chat box and we'll go through this. I'm going to read probably two different comments or two different messages, and then we'll move on to the rest of the presentation. All right, Got a message from Jill. I think the faculty do mirror the student population in our department. However, our college administration does not. It is mainly white. More leaders of color are needed. I think too often there is an excuse that these people simply don't want these roles. And I believe there's more to the story. Very good, Jill. Great comment. And I'm going to read one more. Stephen, thank you. My leadership team does not reflect the students we serve or the faculty staff we claim to support. As I mentioned above, I'm the only person of color in an administrative role. I'm also one of 8 males out of 28 administrators. Very good, Stephen. And I replied to your quote also, your message earlier. We could talk this week if you care to. Let's move on to diverse pool of applicants pipeline. This is something else that we can do. How do we promote diversity within an organization and positive and effective interactions among diverse people? Well, for practice, we could have a diverse pool of applicants pipeline. In order to have a diverse pool of applicants pipeline, first and foremost, you have to expand your network. You have to expand your network and broaden your mind, broaden your thinking, and welcome diversity into your professional network. You have to welcome that into your professional network. You have to invite people who don't look like you, have different perspectives, to have a seat at the table. But when they have a seat at the table, allow them to have an active voice. Not just say, I have a diversity strategic committee comprised of people from various backgrounds and socioeconomic status and different ethnicity, but you don't hear from them. You don't allow them to speak. If you're genuine with your actions, it will show in your organization. If you're genuine with the measurable steps, it will show in the people that you surround yourself with. Saying that there's a very limited pool of people of color to recruit and hire from should no longer be acceptable and is merely an excuse not to diversify your organization. Someone made a comment in the chat box about this earlier. Stop using this as an excuse. If you don't want to hire diversity within your organization, say so. But stop saying that there's not a diverse group of individuals or the diversity pool is very limited. Stop using this as an excuse. This should no longer be tolerated and acceptable in organizations that want to embrace diversity. If you want to embrace diversity, bring certain people to the table and make it happen. Diversity trainings and resources. Employ training on multicultural issues and embracing diversity in the workplace. We have to have experts at times that come in to show us. Maybe you have train the trainer model. Bring individuals to come in to show us how can we have these dialogues? How can we make people comfortable in a safe place, in a brave space to have these conversations? It's not just about having a book discussion or doing a book talk, and then after the book discussion is over in several weeks or months, and then you go back to your same routine. There's a little more to it than that. Treat the diversity and inclusivity as a journey, as a life journey, that you will embrace diversity within your organization and diversity. You embrace diversity, embrace inclusion in your organization. It must be a journey. It's a process that we all go through. But treating as if we're going to check the box and say, yes, we've done that, it's not good enough. Evaluate the effectiveness of the training. If you bring training, a training model to your organization to address these issues, how do you know it's effective? Again, let's go back to the data. Allow the data to drive the discussion. Check to see whether or not it's effective. Establish an online repository of resources to help people who might experience microaggressions or macroaggressions within your organization. Have some resources online. so they can understand, how do I address these issues? I might be the only minority male in my organization doing what I do, and I'm feeling the microaggression. Where can I go for help? Where can I go with other like-minded individuals who might be going through what I'm going through, so I could share with that person or with the group of individuals? How about an anonymous online forum for employees to report microaggressions? I put anonymous because individuals are now stepping out, disclosing what they've been through, the treatment that they had to endure for a number of years in their organizations. Some people don't have a choice. They must remain in that organization because of employment. They have to take care of their family. But it doesn't mean because they have to stay there because they need work, it doesn't mean they should be treated any differently. So I have an anonymous online forum for employees to complete, to call out these microaggressors out there. Establish and enforce policies that address microaggressions. It's one thing to have a policy in place, but another thing is to enforce that policy. Don't just have a policy in place, which is no different than having a strategic plan for diversity in place and not enforce it, not carrying it out. You have to execute it. You have to carry it out for it to be beneficial and effective. We kind of touched on this already, having a diversity dialogue. How do you help individuals to have mutual understanding, especially when people have different viewpoints? There's certain things that I was taught growing up that you don't discuss in public. You don't discuss your religion. You don't discuss politics. You don't discuss that in the workplace. And I'm thinking, because of those different and strong viewpoints, that it's difficult for people to come together. But in order to have these dialogues, we must be able to set aside our differences. We must be able to seek to understand others, understand what other people are going through, understand when they bring issues to you. Walk in their shoes for a minute and see what they're going through. Understand, empathize with people in order to embrace a culture of diversity and inclusion. We must empathize. We must understand from different perspectives. Realizing that one must have a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset. If you genuinely want to see your organization thrive this year, moving forward, embracing diversity, if you genuinely want to see that happen, well, we have to evolve in our minds, evolve in our thinking, have that growth mindset. Transforming educators' preparation program. I'm going to spend maybe a couple minutes here, because being an assistant professor, working with individuals who aspire to become future assistant principals and superintendents and other facets of administration and education, it is my job to instill in our students the importance and the understanding that when you all leave this institution, you're not going to just serve somebody who looks just like you. You might serve individuals who don't look like you. You might serve individuals who might not want to speak to you. But how do you interact with other people and how you make other people feel is all about the respect people might show you one day. We have to have the mutual understanding that we as professors, and we have a teacher ed program. What are we instilling in our students, in our teacher candidates? We must transform our programs in higher education. We must transform our program in equipping our teacher candidates to have those dialogues when they go out to the classroom, that they're prepared to talk about, racial issues, that they are prepared to talk about different ethnicity groups, about why is it that certain groups are marginalized, that they are able to help those students who are marginalized, to help them to become better students, to help them to improve academically, socially. We're not preparing students just to work with people who look just like them. So transforming the teacher and school leadership preparation program and ensuring that all educators are able to relate to their students from diverse population. In order to teach students, we must reach students. In order to teach students, we must reach our students. So that means we have to relate to those students who don't look like us all the time. Providing courses on a continual basis that will help all educators to speak up and to speak out about racial matters and inequalities to their students. Not just have a standalone diversity course and say, okay, my students that come through our program at our college, they have to take a diversity course. So they should be equipped. No, again, this should be a journey. This should be a continual process. School districts could consider having professional development that will continue to speak on diversity issues, to continue to speak on how to include all students when you talk about academic achievement. Why is there still a gap in 2020? And we live in a country that's so rich. There's a gap because we failed to include those students who have been marginalized. And because those students don't have the active voice, and many of those students don't know how to self-advocate for themselves. They don't have parents speaking out to help them. And so we tend to forget those students. But as educators, no child should be left behind. We should bring all students up in order to positively affect your organization, especially in K-12. You want to get those students who are lagging behind and bring them up to speed. So we in higher ed, we need to reconsider how we're preparing future teachers and future administrators. So for the takeaway for today, I want you to spend 2 minutes, and then I'm going to go through the chat box and see if there are any questions that I can answer before we conclude this session. So for our takeaway, what are 2 things that you can take back to your organization that will help to promote positive and effective interactions within diverse cultures? Give you about 2 minutes, and I'm gonna start reading through the chat box and see if there are any questions, and I will address those questions as they come in. Stephen, I'm gonna read a message from Stephen. He said, people of color often do not want to work in a place where we do not see others that look like us. When we research an institution or a place that we are interested in working at and see that there are not many people who look like us that work there, it sends a message that we're not welcomed and will not be able to move up in the organization. Very powerful, Stephen. Very powerful message. Very powerful. But what we need to keep in mind too, Stephen, that if we feel in that manner, such sentiment, how can we break certain barriers? And I definitely understand where you're coming from. But how do we break those barriers? How do we help to change people's mindset? We change it based on how we conduct our affairs, how we do our business, being the best at what you do. Jesse, thank you for sharing. As I work in a library, I'm going to bring back book talks, dialogue sessions, and creating an online location for reporting microaggressions. Very good. Very good. I like that, Jesse. I want to thank you to President Whiteside, to my president. Thank you for sitting in his presentation. Thank you for the kind words again to my president, Whiteside. Roxanne Bowen, you said embracing diversity at all levels. Very good. How do you embrace diversity at all levels throughout your organization? The importance of recruiting diverse people. And there's so much that we can talk about, but we only have 4 minutes. But if you're not able to recruit certain people from diverse perspectives, diverse backgrounds, diverse cultures, you might have to bring in an expert to do that. There's companies out there that specializes in headhunting for diverse individuals. So if you can't do it, let somebody else help you, because it will pay dividends in the future when you have an organization that represent the people that you serve. Jill, I can work with the department to incorporate equity, inclusion, and social justice topics throughout the curriculum. Very good, Jill. I can work for grants and other programs to help fund the study of inequity in the organization and to develop policies to create more equitable treatment in the institution in terms of hiring and retaining employees. Very good, Jill. I like that. Krista says something about zip codes matter. Yes, Krista, zip codes do matter. Our job is to do the work and offer the input to make the difference in number of faculty, staff, and administration that are diverse. Continued dialogue and training is necessary. Yes. If you don't think zip codes matter, think about if you're a parent of young children. My wife and I have 3 beautiful children, school age children. Our oldest is only 6 years old. So when we were making the move to Austin Peay, to the Clarksville area of Tennessee, the only thing we're going through our minds is that where we're going to purchase a house. And wherever we purchase a house, we got to make sure they have pretty decent schools. So zip codes do matter. Thank you so much for the kind words, Jacqueline. Bethany, thank you for the kind words. Candace, thank you for the kind words. I'm going the list of resources are out here. And here's my contact information. What I want to do, I want to, I believe the conference is going to release my presentation to you all. And so you should be able to have a copy of my presentation as well. But if they don't release it, please take down my email address and email me, and I'll be more than happy to share that with you all. Thank you, Candace, for the kind words. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Keith, for the kind words. I really appreciate it. I thank you all for your active active involvement. This is a little different to be able to present and not be able to hear from you all, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you for the work that you all are doing. Let's take it to the next level. Let's not just sit and get, and that's why we had 3 or 4 different activities embedded in my presentation. I believe that we need to do the work. All right. Thank you so much. You all have a great day. Contact me if I can do anything for you and your organization. Have a great one. Take care.